Now, with all that happened with the school shooting and the shooting in Buffalo, New York at that supermarket the week before, the debate over gun control has been heating up on Capitol Hill. Now, tomorrow, the House Judiciary Committee will look at 8 new pieces of gun legislation. Among the proposals, raising the legal purchase age for semi-automatic rifles from age 18 to 21. A ban on high-capacity magazines and regulating how firearms are stored, among other rules. The House would then take up whatever gets moved forward when it returns next week. Meanwhile, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy and Republican Senator John Cornyn also reportedly met virtually on Tuesday to see if there is a bipartisan path on gun legislation in that chamber. Niall Stange, our friend and White House columnist for The Hill, joining me right now. I got a little tongue-tied there. Niall, it's good to see you. Is this the first time we've really seen substantial bipartisan movement in Congress on gun control ever?
Certainly the most recent, or at least in my recent memory, this is the most substantial. We have seen Senator Murphy, the Democratic senator, who's very much identified with this issue, has talked about the fact that he feels the atmosphere is different this time. He feels that members of both parties are approaching this with sincerity. Now, of course, sincerity does not guarantee success, but it does suggest that there is something a little bit different in the air on Capitol Hill this time around.
But the question is, what will happen once that legislation makes it to the Senate?
Absolutely. And there the question is that for a sufficient majority to be arrived at, 10 Republican senators at least would have to join all Democratic senators in voting for it. Now, the Republican side of the aisle has been typically much more skeptical of gun control laws. There is some trading going on, I think, on Capitol Hill as to whether you could get priorities that are typically more identified with Republicans as part of this overall bill. So you could have things like school security, for example, or gun storage, which are things that Republicans tend to emphasize, whereas Democrats tend to put so much of the emphasis on gun control.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about what Republicans and Democrats are kind of scuffling over here, maybe having to barter over. Lawmakers have some bipartisan support with expanding red flag laws, but some House Republicans say there's no real due process for those who might be wrongly flagged, so that's their concern. And it's also been noted that in the Uvalde case in Texas, Salvador Ramos, that gunman, he had no criminal history. So has there been any talk about how communities, schools, parents, social media platforms can all work together in establishing more warning signs?
There has been talk about that. I'm just not sure it has reached Capitol Hill. I mean, as you're aware, Adrienne, there's a whole national conversation about picking up on those warning signs, people feeling at liberty to report those warning signs without negative impacts on them. As for red flag laws, the issue does arise sometimes. Would people have firearms that they legally own taken from them? And that would be the case if a judge ruled in that direction. On the flip side, after the Parkland massacre in 2018, Florida passed a red flag law with very strong bipartisan support. They estimate that since then, 6,000 people have had firearms taken from them, those people thought to be at risk, perhaps, of committing violence. So, you know, you have to balance the right of the individual with, obviously, the right for community safety and for people not to get shot at school or a grocery store or anywhere else.
Well, this is why it's such an intense debate, you know, because there are a lot of people, in fact, people who've contacted me who said, you know, as a responsible gun owner, this is the case that I make. And whether or not we can legislate laws that actually protect responsible gun owners versus criminals, can we draw those lines? I know that lawmakers have also avoided banning the AR-style semi-automatic rifles, correct?
Yes, that's correct. There was a ban that lasted 1994 to 2004, but there's no realistic possibility of that being reinstated anytime soon.
Niall Stange from The Hill, thanks as always for being with us.
Thanks, Adrienne.
All right, see you Friday. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.